Record audio in the presenter. Stop recording. Okay, so I think we're good. Okay, welcome everyone. This is Barry Blake, Associate Executive Director with SMI. I'm delighted to have with us today for this webinar Donna Van Vlerah, the SVP of the Support Division at Parkview Health. Donna, how are you today?
I am fabulous, Barry, and thank you for having me today.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So the reason for this webinar, Donna presented this material at our fall forum, and it was one of the highest rated sessions that we did. And we wanted a chance to share this with the rest of the SMI community. There were obviously a number of breakouts during the fall forum, and not everybody gets a chance to participate. So this is our opportunity to share with you some of the learnings. And Donna spent a tremendous amount of time kind of building the vision of what a future supply chain function could be, what capabilities it could have, how strategic the function can become, all with the idea of supply chain becoming a competitive advantage for the health system. So, as I said, I'm delighted to have Donna with us today. So, Donna, I'll happily hand over to you, and you can run us through the material.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So this is a thought piece. It's meant to spark ideas and looking at where we're going to be in the near term and the far term as we develop our organization. So entitled Logistical Operations, Our Future State. Happy to share these with you today and hope that they do spark that information. We'll talk a little bit about my background, the things that have influenced me as a leader in this industry, how I think we've had some evolutionary growth in our areas through the years between material and supply chain, and then do a little bit of a case study value proposition conversation that might also help us to be able to frame our work. So the 4 points we really want to hit hard. So I have been with Parkview Health for just under 10 years. Like to share a little bit with you about that, talk about my personal background and our organizational structure. So Parkview Health is a not-for-profit organization with our mission to improve your health and inspire well-being. We are community-based in northern Indiana, the largest employer, and as you can see from the right notation of various awards, we really try to be a top leader within the healthcare industry, providing that proper care for our community. We have a lot of primary care doctors that are associated with that and specialists, and a 9-hospital system. A little over 12,000 employees for our system. Now, personally, my journey is maybe a little bit different than some in the industry. I started out as a Marine Corps logistician, and I won't go through all of the items that I had over the years, but you can see that it's a pretty varied background, and it gave me this concept of logistics and what that means to enablement to an organization. I left the Marine Corps after 20 years, and I went into the aerospace industry where I did complex contract management and phased maintenance and various acquisition platforms. While I was in that aerospace capacity, I also went to school and got a Lean Six Sigma black belt and have been a practicing black belt ever since then. I transitioned for a period of time into corporate compliance and got my corporate compliance and ethics certification and worked for about 5 years in the compliance industry. So very, very, very versed background, and it kind of help you give you an idea of where I'm coming from. Now, I'm certainly not in my enterprise alone. I have a number of associates who help me lead this logistical organization that I'm in charge of. I'll just hit these very quickly. Underneath my umbrella is real estate and property management, led by Kevin Scholes. Tom Minnick is an engineer running all of my corporate facilities. That includes all of my hospital locations and any attached medical office buildings. Wes Oburn is my executive director for nutrition services. He is also executive chef and runs our dietary program and our clinical and retail operations. Chris Jellison is responsible for the entire pharmacy realm, that is clinical and retail. Dan Malloy is our environmental service, and he's responsible for all our housekeeping. We don't like to use that word, but he's responsible for all our hospital-based and non-hospital-based environmental service program. Jack Hahn, we call SCORE, is our supply chain, and it really looks for integrating technology in with practices. And Jack's responsible for all of our physician offices, over 400, and all of our hospital systems, purchasing, contracting, and acquisition. And then we also have a conference center. Rob Harmon runs our event and conference center. So I have a lot of folks who are helping us be successful.
Hey, Donna, just a quick question on those folks. Now, were they all, have they been long-term employees with Parkview and supply chain, or do they have other industry experience like yourself?
Yeah, it's a great question. Most of these individuals were already in place, but they were in vertical silos. So they were all embedded in their own pipeline, in their own hospitals, and creating the corporate director program brought them all together on a single team reporting up to me. So it's a little bit of a matrix relationship. They're solid line to me, and then they're dotted line back to the hospital. And each of those individuals own all the personnel under those areas. So support division now has over 1,300 people that are in that organization.
Yep. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Pretty big group.
Yeah.
So these folks become pivotal in influencing how we looked at our influences. We're going to talk about really three major points here. We want to talk a little bit about being a visionary navigator, feel that that's a really important concept. Talk about the change house, which deals with change management. And then we want to also talk a little bit about layers of business. And you're going to see as we progress through these 4 points, how in the end they're going to kind of come together into a single thought piece. So I think as logisticians, as supply chain folks, we are all very focused on creating the future. We have visions about things that we want to create and new ideas, better ways of producing it. That's certainly what SMI is all about, is trying to make sure that we're bringing best practices to the industry and we're sharing those, and that we're bringing value to the organizations, whether that be for the vendor or for the hospitals that we serve. And I like the thought of a visionary navigator because it takes the fact that you're thinking about and planning for things that are in the future, right? It's a visual thing of where you're going. You're being innovative. You're creating these concepts. And those are all well and fine. But if you aren't the navigator, the person who's figuring out how to achieve those thoughts and dreams and ideas, it's really not going to get you anywhere. So I think as an industry, we have to not only think about where we want to be in 3, 5, and 10 years, we have to put in place mechanisms that allow us to achieve those goals. And hence my thought of becoming, we all need to become visionary navigators. Hope that makes sense. Now, the change house is something that I think is pretty pivotal to all of us, and regardless of what situation that we're in. The change house has 4 rooms, and I didn't come up with this. It came out of the 60s, and it's footnoted on here for you if you want to look it up. But it talks about the fact that there are 4 rooms in the change house. There's the contentment and complacency room. There is the denial room. I'll get it out. And there's renewal and revival, and the chaos and confusion. And these 4 rooms have a couple interesting points. First of all, we have to really look at current state. We understand that people really like to stay in that complacent room. We as human beings are naturally vectored towards repetitive things. We have the same things we like to do every day. People get up and drink their coffee. They drink their Coke, right? The things that are comfort levels. And people like to stay in that room because it's comfortable. It's what we're used to. But when we get in a period of transition where we know that we have to change or change is coming upon us, we either deny it at first where we just don't want to recognize that the industry or the circumstances around us are changing, and we make up excuses. If we get to the confusion and chaos room, we get to a point where we realize that, hey, change is upon us, but we don't know how to fix it. We don't know how to adjust to the change in our routine. And it's a period of a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety and difficulty in an organization. And it's not till we get to figuring out how we're going to transition that it really comes to play, and we're in that renewal and revival room where we found the path, we're on the right path, and people start getting excited and energized about the future. I mean, ideally, you always want to stay in that room. You want to always be reinventing yourself, questioning your people, your processes, your technology in order to make yourself better. And one of the things that's pivotal about change is recognizing that not everybody is in the same room at the same time. And people move through these rooms at different rates. So we as change managers, looking as visionary navigators, have to make sure that we have good change management plans in place that allow people to be cycled through these rooms and ultimately get back up to that renewal and revival room so that we can optimize where we're going in the future. So in essence, we have to be that change agent. We have to help people through that process in order to get to the other side. Really pivotal, I think, for us in our roles because we are constantly introducing new products into the system, and we have to be good change management experts. I also like to think of our business on 3 different layers, and this is important for our industry as we think about how we play into large hospital systems. So there's the strategic, the operational, and the tactical. We all recognize that back in the day, in the basement, we had our materials managers. They were very tactical. They bought what people told them, they took them where they needed to be, and that was a very transactional relationship. They were not up and up. People were not asking them for their input on how to be more efficient and more productive. Very, very basic. And then we've seen the industry kind of shift to this supply chain manager, and it was more focused at the operational level. People were starting to pay attention that supply chain was driving opportunities, efficiencies, cost reductions within the system, and we gained some toeholds. We started fighting for places at the table so that our stories could be told and expressed. And here's where I think we get into the visionary navigator standpoint and the conversation starts to come to gel, is I really believe that for our organization in Parkview Health, we are now at that strategic level. We're looking at logistics. And this is where I talk about evolutionary or revolutionary and the branding of our name. So we really are looking at a multidisciplined impact. We talked on that first slide about all the people who will report up to me, right? That's that multidisciplinary team. All those folks are still doing acquisition and contracting and parts, right? But they're now flowing through a common set of teammates that have a single focus, no longer stovepipes. And for our vendor partners, I think it's really important to understand the strategic advantage that when you have a logistics leader in their organization that is providing great benefit, helping people through change, and a seat at that top table, you now have the ability to work with your vendor partners and create a more strategic and dynamic relationship. Any questions, Barry, before I hit the third point of the brief?
No, well, I was going to wait till the end, but it's back on the change house, and you don't have to shift slides. This is fine. I guess when you you made a really interesting point about the importance of, recognizing that people are going to be in different rooms in that house over time. Do you actually go as make it as formal as we need to understand where people are, where key leaders are in those rooms, where support staff are, and do you actually map that out, or is it more of we know we're going to have a certain percentage here, we're going to have a certain percentage here. As you think about, transitioning or change or moving the organization in a different direction, how systematic is that approach?
Sure, great question. So I think that the larger the scope and the more complexity of the project, the more organized that your change management skills have to be. If it's a small implementation of an item affecting a very small population, your change can be a little bit less formal. But as the complexity of an item goes up, so does your plan have to go. For example, if you were to change IV pumps, that's a system-wide impact. Affects multiple departments, multiple different types of workers, nurses, pharmacy, IT. So that one takes a higher level of craftsmanship when you do those change management plans. I like to use something called a stakeholder analysis, and that can either be on an individual level or it could be on a functional level. And then you start going through and looking at it and saying, so if I'm going to change to an IV pump, where do I think IS is going to be? Are they going to be delighted? Are they going to be resistant? And you can start developing plans about, now, how do I help the IS team cycle through to get to a place where they're engaged and on board with bringing on a new IV pump? So yeah, I really think the change, how formal you get is paralleled with the complexity of what you're asking to drive. And it needs to be a written out, thought out process that's really helping people map through that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it certainly does. Thank you.
So we talked a little bit about this material management, traveling to logistics, and is this a revolutionary growth, or is this just an evolutionary growth, right? The difference is, is it something that just happens over time? Darwin recognized that those of us who don't evolve become extinct. So it's pretty pivotal as industry thought leaders that we're really thinking about how we need to evolve in order to be where our organizations are for the future. So I'd like to just touch on this concept, looking at the difference between material and supply chain. And I wanted to provide everyone a kind of a conceptual definition of what I thought logistics operations really mean. So, that material management to me goes back to the three layers we talked about, very tactical, right? They're the folks that were living in the basement. They were considered a support area. Their transactions and their operational scope was very limited. People didn't often invite them up to hear about what their thoughts and ideas were. The control was very decentralized, meaning products everybody got to buy whatever product they wanted from whomever they wanted. We had a lot of vendors walking in the doors saying, hey, buy this, right? So it was a very tough time, I think. We were all dependent on the GPOs and the contracting they did, and we were very reactionary. Somebody had a need, we reacted to it. So I think that those days are in the rear view mirror as we look back. We still know there are probably a handful of them out there, but the reality of it is that if we're still in that world, that hospital system is in big trouble because they're not finding the efficiency and growth that they needed. And what we've seen was this evolutionary growth into more of an operational level function. We've seen titles change in the organization, and people start looking for efficiencies that leader brought to the table, subject matter expertise that they recognized that they didn't have by not having that person available there. There was changes to the model about how we purchased and contract and did acquisitions, and there was a relationship change, right? I mean, in my organization, the vendor relationship is very much based with supply chain versus the individual clinical leader. And even though we might pull them in because they're critical to the conversation, we like to have a triad. We like to have the person who's consuming or using that product. We like to have the supply chain person there, and we like to have the vendor. And together, that triad becomes a very strong relationship, and it helps everybody with change management. we know that our GPOs play, at least in my organization, play a very different role than they did under that material management. We have a lot more contracts that are private. We have manufacturer direct contracts, and we are using the GPOs as a very different tool. So really important. We often act as consultants. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to follow up on that. Do you see that morphing even further? One of the questions we often get is the kind of how will the GPO kind of evolve or the GPO relationship evolve in the future? Do you see that continuing to morph, or do you look and say, you know what, the way we're using them right now makes a lot of sense, and we see this kind of for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, hospitals are like zebras. I know all zebras have stripes, but there's no zebra has the same stripe. So I think that everybody uses GPOs for different ways. I think that there's still a lot of benefit for the baseline contracts that GPOs do. We might do an enhanced agreement, or we might do different pricing structures, but we don't have to go back and do every term and condition on a group of items. So I think that for us, they still have value. I'm not sure that extending into the future that may not morph also. But I think that there are some who rely upon GPOs for their various analytical platforms. For us, we don't, but for some they do, and I think that they've looked at seeing how they can bring value to their members via that mechanism. And we've certainly seen a shrinkage of the GPO as an industry, right? We've seen a lot of mergers that have narrowed that playing field. So I think it will be interesting to watch them and see how that evolves in the future.
Yeah, definitely.
So, I think the other big thing that supply chains brought was infusion of technology, right? The big data, the analytics, the bringing decision making, helping drive reducing clinical variations, efficiency in, using EDI, using demand planning, using technology to help you drive efficiency in your organization. And those resulted in big wins and furthered our place at the table for looking at how important supply chain is. So for us in Parkview Health, we kind of said, what's the next evolution, right? Because we felt like we conquered a lot of that supply chain optimization. Have won a lot of awards for good performance, done all the best practice things, used a lot of the tools, quite honestly, that SMI has out on their website, and to make sure that we had best practices instilled. So as we look to the future, we really put this idea of logistical management up front. And you can see that we thought that this was the integration and implementation of complex operating systems and the deployment of resources in order to fulfill the end customer's requirements in the most efficient and effective manner. Now, what does that mean? That means that we really modeled, that we analyzed, we visualized, that we optimized the things that we did across all industries of Parkview Health. It was absolutely not limited to just med-surg and OR. It was pharmacy. It was what your facilities guys are using. It was what your nutrition service team was using. So it really took the entire bandwidth of acquisition in the organization and brought it to bear under a single focus for your organization. And that, to me, and it was something, here again, the background why I mentioned about the military was from the military. They have this logistician's job, and it really is looking at that entire umbrella of operations throughout the organization. And I love General Barrow's statement that, amateurs talk about logistics, but professionals study the logistics. And tell you a little sea story, when Desert Storm and Desert Shield were going on, the thing that was pivotal for deciding whether we could launch into the beginning of the war, the offensive portion of the war, was whether the logistics was in place and could sustain the operation. So we understood that tether for us to be able to provide support for the organization was wholly banked on getting us in country, getting set up, and getting that logistical pipeline across the board for all spectrums. Food, you heard the old saying, beans, Band-Aid, and bullets, but it really was that entire spectrum. So this made me think about how we did the same thing within a health system. So the final point is really kind of saying we've set those 3 points, which I thought were important to tell everyone a little bit of the background about how we've gotten to this concept of logistics before we went in to look at maybe the supply chain study, the natural progression of how we got to support division, and a tool we use called a business canvas that we show value proposition.
Hey, Donna, can I interrupt just one more time? So I love the whole concept, and I love the references to those big operational movements that come into play with war fighting and what have you. I think you could look at that in any type of, even say, like disaster relief, for instance. The efficiency and quickness with you're able to mobilize is the difference between, a certain number of people living and not living. So it's fascinating. I guess the question I have is, did you have any internal issues with getting others to recognize the definition of logistics that you just put forth, right? Because to me, your experience in military it's almost second nature. However, folks who are unfamiliar may not have that same perception.
Yeah, I actually put together a proposal to create a sport division about 6 years ago, ran it up the chain, talked to people about it, and it died. Didn't resonate. Went back a few years later and pitched it again. And part of my ability to get the second time pitch through was the fact that we had done so much in the supply chain. We had proven our value, found our place, and we had credibility for what we were doing. So it's a good transition, Barry, because as we look at this concept of perfecting the basics, the supply chain was about that. We had worked on all the stuff that the industry talked about, category management, and looking at improving the terms and conditions in our contracts, putting statements of work in there, making sure we had metrics-based contracts, making sure that we were able to really bring together a strong organization. We had, and this is actually over $100 million now. We've had over $107 million of optimization, real dollars that we were able to document in savings over the life of ours since 2012. We honed our negotiation skills, and because of SMI, we really took a different look at our vendor relationships and really looked at that more of a partnership. We did a lot with life cycle contract management. We evened out our contract management, and we looked at making sure that we were segregating vendors into various categories, and we'll talk about that. We went through your perfect order, Barry, that you have out on your website, and we got into data management, making sure that we had a team that we assembled, and that team knew integration platforms, making sure that we were optimizing the programs we were using, brought in technology because technology became an enabler. So we were able to create a warehouse management system, a point of view system, and have a visual inventory management. So it really, really did a big job. We did create a central distribution center, a warehouse, if you will. I like to think about this as more of a central repository. I'm not trying to replace, nor do I want to be a distributor. We aren't everything for everybody, but we look at those things that make sense for us. So we house things into that single system. We converted things to a push model. With the software we're using, we have these point of use technology sites that allows us to have virtual inventory management. We can see every inventory site out there, and we can predictively model by demand planning how much inventory needs to be at those sites. We use the Joint Commission criteria of 96 hours of stock in those point of use locations, and we push products to them rather than having individuals request it. We're in our second year of implementing that in our ORs. So we manage all the supplies in our ORs, and we're pushing technology in those areas too. So it's really allowed us to have higher levels of inventory optimization, our order and delivery management. We've even folded disaster management in it, so that warehouse has disaster stock embedded in it. Entire different presentation, but we've got a whole program around how we do optimization of disaster management, and we folded the transportation of those things, as you can see with our Don't Text and Drive truck. So really had, I think, a really efficient use of that area. We also expanded on some core competencies, and we recognized that our information technology platforms became really important for the system. So we went out to our IS department and we said, hey, let us manage your contract and let us manage your getting all your parts, your computers and your cables and all that stuff. We'll put them into inventory and we'll help you drive that quicker. So we picked up all of the IS. We had a ton of contracts of things we were building. So we had a group that picked up contract management. We managed utilities centrally. We bought, for example, natural gas as a commodity on the open market for the system. For that alone, we have 6-digit savings in that program. And as I mentioned, we also put that point of use technology and put our people inside that operating room, and we are now managing those areas. So we moved, I believe, started moving away from that operational just med-surg stuff, and we started moving into that entire spectrum of buy across the system. And we got all that done, and we're like, okay, now where do we go from here? So we got the basics done, and that was our natural progression to say, hey, we've got all the supply chain stuff optimized. We're doing all these really cool things. How do we expand that? And that's where we decided that we needed to leverage all the technology that was based in supply chain and expand that to other areas that created this concept of a support division. It leveraged the fact that we had a distribution center. No reason, right, that we can't have computers sitting on a shelf and putting them forward. So we pulled in all the folks you see here. The facilities folks all now report in to support division along with environmental service, nutrition, supply chain, pharmacy, and other logistical activities that bring in. We really felt like we had a lot of synergy between these departments. And it's kind of an amazing thing because these are folks who never, that didn't necessarily talk to each other. But all of a sudden, when they were all on the same team, in the same family, if you will, all of a sudden a lot of problems started going away because they were all had the same common shared visions and goals. So we got a lot of great optimization out of it. How do you tell that story? You know, I mean, it's great that you do all this stuff, but one of the things I think that all of us need to do, whether you're at that supply chain or you're continuing to evolve, is we have to make sure that we're managing that message up, that we're getting it in front of the board of directors, that we're getting it in front of senior leaders, and that they understand that we're a revenue driver for the organization. You know, I sat down and I added up the revenue that bases out of all of our support division areas, and we almost make up half of our organization's revenue. And I know that's hard to believe, but I challenge folks to stop and take a look at it. And they also recognize that we became significant people who were controlling expenses, and that through that, we could drive outcomes. We played a major factor in hospitality. So when people come in and they look at it right, we're the first thing that people see, that first impression that helps drive our brand forward. We absolutely touch every patient every day. There's not, whether it's the bed you're laying in, the lights, the room pressure, the supplies, the pharmaceutical goods, we have many interactions with patients. And I know people don't think of logistics world as being clinical, but we are. I mean, we have folks who are seeing patients, whether it's our dietary folks who are up doing consults, or it's our pharmacy folks, or it's the person who's making sure that they have the next day OR case carts ready to go, or ordering that critical part for the next day's surgery. So multiple ways that we touch people. And that's something I think we need to get out there, that we're not just somebody who's providing supply chain services, we're also providing these very clinically based services. I don't know if I mentioned it, but we also have nurses that are in our supply chain. We have 3 master degree nurses that also help us make sure that we have good contact with our customers and we're able to understand and interpret how we play. The final thing I'd share on this value proposition is that we really are a huge player in the hospital from a regulatory standpoint. If you look at support division, we have almost 80% of the Joint Commission's items that are reviewed. So we play a major factor in the success of the organization. We did this on something, we put all this story together on a business canvas. And you can go out to Google and you can type in value proposition and you're going to come up with this. I did not invent it. I stole it from the internet. But I think that this is a really strong way to talk to your senior leadership about how you bring value. So you talk a little bit about who your key partners are, distributors, GPOs, sole source contracts, key critical vendors. And you'll notice in the second column over it says key activities. Those are really the organizations that are in support division. Those are my teammates, my facility guys, my nutrition guys. Those are all my teammates. And then you drop down to the bottom and you'll notice key resources. Hey, we are drenched in technology. And we're running in forefronts with these, and we're bringing those that technology to help us drive the efficiency in our organization. Really critical. Now, if you fly all the way to the right-hand blue columns, you'll notice that we have customer relationships and customers. So when we think of customers on the far right side, we have a ton of internal customers, right? That's kind of our traditional things. We have our coworkers, our physicians, our leaders. We have ancillary departments like radiology and lab. But we have also all these external customers. There's our patients, our guests coming through our organization, tenants, people that we rent buildings to and that are interact. We are a big player in our not-for-profit community, right? We have a lot of support that we give those. And we have alliances with other smaller healthcare systems that we call it our Friends of Parkview program, where we try to help other smaller community hospitals navigate the complex world of healthcare. And then we have a regulatory piece, right? Tons, from Joint Commission to OSHA, the health departments, drug enforcement agencies, pharmacy agencies. I mean, we have a ton of people that we manage from a regulatory standpoint that keeps our hospital out of the newspaper and on the right track. And when we think about the relationships with these, we came up with kind of our internal purpose statement, which is that we really want to have excellent, we want to listen, care, and serve. So that's our kind of our tagline. We listen, we care, we serve, because we recognize that we're very much a hospitality organization. We have 4 key tenets that we're collaborative. We know that that's a pivotal part of what we do. We're individually and collectively accountable for the services that we provide our folks. We certainly have to be situationally adaptable in healthcare because there's always something that's unique that you have to be able to not rubber stamp and be able to meet those unique customer needs. We have to try to be effective communicators because at the end of the day, if you have good change management skills, you have to also have effective communication. We also went out with each one of our hospital presidents and our various service line leaders, and we put together individual service excellence agreements that for each one of our areas outlined almost like a contract about what we did, what services we provided, and what they could expect out of us. We went back and looked at customer surveys to make sure that we were driving the right response for them. We looked at value analysis and how we could make sure that we were driving efficiency and reduction of clinical variations. We created a underperforming rounding program where we went out to the hospitals and we rounded as a team to make sure that we could pull up scores and really help drive a high performance for our organization. And if you kind of go down to the middle of that, the purple, the value proposition, and you kind of take a step back, you realize that this integrated logistics concept that we talk about, that we're really touching every element of Parkview Health every day. The centralized distribution was optimized because it's not just looking at med-surg, it's looking at the total logistical line. We want to make sure that we're sharing that. Community benefit is a key thing for our organization. So we want to point out the value we bring. Like we talked about, that 5-star, that first impression was really important to our organization. We also recognized that we were key influencers in expense and cost mitigation, as we talked about. And you can tell a story about it as you're going along. Regulatory piece, key generator, right, of revenue. We talked about that also. And then we had a significant interaction with patients. And we told some stories about our coworkers and the encounters they had with patients. And I'm just going to give you one. We had an environmental service worker who was in a room and they were cleaning, and the patient lost their cap and they were undergoing chemotherapy treatments. And they went down and purchased a cap in our gift shop and took it back up to the individual and really had a significant impact on that patient's experience. So one small example. And we're really making sure that 1,300 people that make up this organization are engaged and that they're providing that high level of performance. Because as we look at our teammates, they have each individual missions. They're deployed over a very large facilities to conduct something successfully and make it back. So we want to make sure that they're really bringing value. So when you look at all these and you think about the dollar value and you start telling that story that this business canvas lays out, you see what a big multiplier and enabler our logistical operations really provide for the organization. So we become that head, that cheerleader, if you will, for our organization. So I mentioned that I really wanted this to be a thought piece, and I wanted folks to ask themselves, so is there some future? I mean, is this something that we're going to see as we've seen people go from materials to supply chain? Are we going to see people now starting to go from supply chain to logistics? I think personally, it's a natural progression for us. I think it's the next frontier of where we're going to be 5 and 10 years from now. I think we have to go there because I think that we're going to be the leaders in helping drive where healthcare is going to be in the next 10 years. And I believe that when you start bringing that level of value, you get to the C-suite. So as an example, I work for the Chief Operating Officer for Parkview Health. I'm no longer embedded under the CFO. Not that that would be bad by any means, but I'm now at that C-suite table, making sure that we're allowed to help have those interactions with our service line leaders, and we're one team, and logistics is a big part of that. We also talk a lot in clinical operations. We're embedded in that. We make sure that our folks have a seat at those tables and that they're our voices are being heard, and that we're creating that value for what we bring. Now, I also want to just share one point on the integration of operations. You know, we speak as one team. So when I have my facilities director out rounding or talking with anyone, at the end of the conversation, they also say, is there anything that I can do for you for anything in support division? Can I take something back to my environmental service teammate? Or did I notice something that all my rounding that I needed to bring back? So now we have 1,300 sets of eyes who are out there looking and listening and creating value for our organization, instead of us remaining in our little silos that we're only worried about our own self. So that's my story, Barry. I hope that you found some points in there that sparked interest and maybe makes us think a little bit different of what our future may bring down the line. Any questions you might have?
No. I mean, I think it's fantastic, and it broadens the scope of the traditional supply chain professional dramatically. And I love the business canvas idea, and I know you got it. You know, there's examples of that, but seeing it spelled out, how you impact these different customers, looking at the scope of the customer base that you have, both internal and external. I think it's very important for supply chain professionals to see that and to recognize that, because now this is just an assumption, but the example you gave where the individual went down and purchased a cap for the patient who had lost his or hers, I don't know if that happens if they don't have this vision of their responsibilities. You know what I mean? That takes a certain level of, we need to see this. We need to see how we are integrated across this entire health system. And our responsibilities are, we have something that we're the bread and butter, but there's also this other element where, we are adding value across different areas that typically we might not. So I think it's that vision, I imagine, took some time to get across to the stakeholders in your organization.
Absolutely. It's a journey, but when we talk about, or we think about, being a visionary navigator, right? That's having the vision of where you want to be, and then helping your team and your organization realize that vision through outstanding, performance.
Yeah. No, Dawn, I can't thank you enough. I think this will be very helpful for different systems, even the vendor partners, because you did bring up a number of points throughout this, how this can impact, or they're part of this triad of key stakeholders, and sharing that vision with them and sharing it with other health systems who may be on, as you say, this is a journey. There's going to be many different organizations at different different stages of that journey. So hopefully this does add some value and help them think through some of the ways to communicate change and lead change. So I can't thank you enough. I think it's a wonderful material, wonderful work that you've done at Parkview.
Well, thank you, Barry, and I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to share, and I hope it helps the industry continue our growth.
Perfect. Thank you, Donna. You have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Barry.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.